Aloha and welcome to Maui Techohana. Wonderful to see everybody on the call, and I'm sure a few more will be joining us as we go along. My name is Annette Lynch. I'm with Maui Economic Development Board. I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping and the agenda before introducing some of the main features for tonight. So just as always, look at your name. You can, if make sure your name is clear. You can also add in your organization, let people know who you're from. You're automatically muted. We'll be putting you into breakout rooms a little shortly, and in that time, be very sure to unmute yourself when you're speaking. And when you are in those breakout rooms, we encourage you to pass the mic, just so that the next person knows that they're on, and it just reduces the awkwardness of who's going next. Presentation is being recorded, the most common question that we get, and will be available later. So that's all. The agenda today. So we're going to have some introductions, and then we're going to go to a breakout, and that's an opportunity to meet the fellow Maui Techohana community, and we'll have some discussion points for you to lead in that breakout. And then our guest speaker, Brian Cohn, will be joining us. And then we'll have another breakout looking at, what have you taken from the presentation. With the speaker as well, we do have time for Q&A. So you can pop your questions in the chat, or you'll be able to raise your hand and ask those questions. We want to have an interactive meeting here with Maui Techohana. And do stick around to the end. We'll have some prizes to draw. And then we should be finishing a little bit about around 6:30. So with that, I am going to pass the mic to President and CEO of Maui Economic Development Board, Leslie Wilkins.
Thank you, Annette. Aloha and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Maui Techohana. This is traditional for MEDB to gather members of our community to have a meetup, talk story, and always feature an interesting dynamic speaker who's working in the technology sector to inspire all of us. We would like to thank our partners in Techohana through the years. They've been with us every step of the way, and that is the County of Maui, as well as the High Tech Development Corporation. Just to let you know who's in attendance along with you, we have a pie chart that will show who's here by the types of business and demographics who are joining us. Clearly, because of Brian Cohn being our keynote speaker tonight and his successes in film, the preponderance of the audience are from arts, entertainment, and recreation, 35% of you, but we have a really nice representation of other businesses and sectors. We just wanted to say that we're keeping our fingers crossed that tonight is the last time we have to gather in Techohana in a virtual space. If infection rates continue to be low, the COVID protocols and safety guidelines lifted, we are really hopeful that in our next quarter, sometime this summer, our next Techohana, we will invite you here to the Research and Tech Park to gather and enjoy each other's company and conversation, and then possibly a post-Techohana convening next door at Maui Brewery to continue the great dialogue. Anyway, thank you all. Hope you stayed well. Thank you to our team who's worked hard to put this on together. And I am passing the mic back to Annette.
Thank you, Leslie. So we have a poll. I'm curious to ask. It's just a simple yes or no question. So I'm just going to pop that up. Do you think a motion picture industry on Maui can be another viable alternative to the visitor industry? So yes or no or unsure, let us know what you think, and we'll be posting those results up on, or I'll be telling you the results. Pop that in there. So far, got a few answering. We have a lot of yeses there. Got 90% saying yes. Great. So we've got 82% saying yes, and the rest saying unsure. So we've got no no's on that. And we're going to ask that question at the end again and see if you've changed your mind on the discussion. So with that, we want that to be a point of discussion in your breakout rooms. We are going to pop you into rooms. Let me just quickly set this up. And you're going to discuss a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of a motion picture industry on Maui and how you might think it resembles or differs from a technology industry. Aloha, welcome back. It looks like you're all engrossed in conversation, making the full use of your time in the breakouts. I hope you had some great discussions. I'm going to pass the microphone to Frank Dorego.
So Brian and I, first of all, I want to welcome everybody. I want to echo every sentiment that Leslie shared earlier. Also, I would also like to make a shout out to the County of Maui and the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation as well. She also mentioned in terms of their support of us at MEDB. Brian and I had a talk story ourselves, and I'm not gonna be the one to kind of give you a spoiler or any alerts. We've advertised him, rightfully so, as a film director, a writer, a music producer, and an educator. So I'm not going to go through his bio, but I want him to talk through his own bio, through his own experience and his own story. But, in talking with him, I found his story very, very interesting and ultimately inspiring, especially within the context of his own career journey and his journey within tech, within the industry, the creative industries. So without further ado, I want to pass the mic over to Brian Cohn, music producer, writer, and director. Thank you, Brian, for being here today.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Frank, and thank you for having me as part of Techohana, Maui Techohana, cool group. Happy to be a part of it, and I'll do my best. Just a second, okay. So, before I get started, I am a Maui boy, first and foremost, originating from Detroit, Michigan. My family was in Detroit. My dad was a Marine who fell in love with the South Pacific. My mother fell in love with the movie South Pacific in the late 50s. And so as they discussed having a family, my dad shared of his dream to live somewhere. And Hawaii was somewhere that he had always thought that would be a cool place to be, let alone to get to visit. So my family moved here in 1969 when my father graduated law school. We landed here in Wailuku, literally. My father was a partner with an attorney here in town by the name of Sandy Langa, the late Sandy Langa, I might add. He passed away a couple of years ago. And so from 1969, Wailuku really was, a big part of my life. My father, who passed away in 1989, always had offices here in town, Church Street, on Vineyard. And so I just was all over this town, this place. Wailuku Elementary is where we started, went to Haleakala School, Kula Elementary, and ultimately Baldwin High School. My father would have preferred me to go to Seabury, but I had heard a rumor that they make you study, and that didn't sound like a good idea for somebody like me. Interesting, because I think some people find it interesting because I'm an educator, and yet I am not a non-academic, and I can paint a life history of not exactly being, an excellent student, if you will. However, I've been a student, and I'd like to feel that in my current job as director of Academy for Creative Media Maui at UH Maui College, that the fact that I'm Kolohe, I can deeply identify with a lot of the people who are at risk. I found my way into the arts and technology as a result, but the arts, I'm an artist, because it's who I was, though it was really hard, as many people, artists will attest. How do you find your voice? How do you find your path into these places? Well, for me, I would suggest that all of this sort of followed me around, and it was so it was a result of really just paying attention, being a student of life. When we first moved to Maui, the first home that we lived in was a house in Ma'alaya way before the condos, that was owned by Henry Kaiser, the Kaiser Permanente guy, had a house here. And so we got it. It was probably, he was friends with Sandy Langa or something. Somehow we were set up in it. And at the exact moment we moved here and we're living in Ma'alaya, real close to the harbor, the motion picture, The Hawaiians, James Michener's sequel to Hawaii, was being shot in the Ma'alaya harbor. For those of you familiar with the film, you might recall, you might be aware that the opening scene takes place with Chinese immigrants being brought to Hawaii on the Carthaginian, no less, and landing in Ma'alaya. But it wasn't Ma'alaya. And so even at age 5 was the first time that I stepped foot on a movie set, and it was in Ma'alaya Harbor. They had transformed it in its entirety. At the same time, my mother was working as a bookkeeper at the restaurant at the Wailuku Hotel, which is now Maui Memorial. And so my brother and I would hang out at the pool all day. And it, as fate would have it, in that beginning of, when we first got here, my brother and I spent days on end playing with Charlie Chaplin's kids, because Geraldine Chaplin was staying in the hotel and was in the motion picture. So from the time I was 5 years old, somehow movies were in my life, and so I picked up on them really early. And here on Maui, theaters, for any of you who might have been on Maui for any length of time, may remember the movie theaters here in town. The King Theater, where the massive construction is going on right now at the corner of Church and Vineyard. I grew up in the King Theater. The Iao Theater, which was a movie theater in the 70s. It became a playhouse much later, but it was primarily a movie theater. And then we had movie theaters in Kahului. We had the Village Cinema in Ka'ahumano Center, which opened around 72. The Maui Theater, which interestingly enough, we were friends, or I made friends with the Hall family who built the theater and operated it for all of those years. So for whatever reason in my life, the things that I'm interested in sort of arrived in an unusual and timely way on an island in the middle of the Pacific. In the 70s, there was no theater aside from Maui Community Theater at the Territorial Building, the old fairgrounds in Kahului. Well, a woman here in town, Linda Condrat, who had 5 daughters and a son, felt the need and started the Maui Youth Theater, which is now MAPA. It transformed over the years into MAPA many years ago. But Linda Condrat started that. And my brother and I were involved in the very first production. So even theater and performance started to arrive, while we were here. I didn't connect much with any of that. I didn't understand it. I was an athlete. I saw myself in that way, playing all sorts of sports. Little League for sure. I was into baseball, but basketball, football, whatever. If it had a ball or a stick, I wanted to be a part of that. So I never really understood early on in my life that I was an artist, or, movies were just something we did and got to do. And back in those days, movies played, there were 2 or 3 movies a day. They didn't stick around for a week. That came much later. So something like the King Theater, which is a block from my father's office, would show 2 or 3 features. So in a day, I could see a surf film, I could see a kung fu movie, the Disney movies. So it was an obsession, not only for myself, but for others like me. My older brother, Bill Cohn, and other kids who were now getting to perform on stage as part of the Maui Youth Theater. Ended up going to Baldwin High School, and my brother was an actor. I wasn't an actor. My brother got really involved with the Baldwin Drama Guild, which was run and operated by a woman, Sue Ann Loudon, now retired, has been for about 12, 15 years. Incredible, dynamic, great shows. When we were kids, these shows, she would tour the shows into the elementary schools. So everybody on island knew about the Baldwin Drama Guild, that there was theater being performed in the high schools at a fairly high level, I might point out. But for me, I didn't want to be on stage. I never saw myself in that way. So I would go to rehearsals and I'd get involved on the tech side of these, supporting my brother, supporting the others who were involved in these productions. But I tell you what I was really doing. I was sitting back and watching and observing Linda Condrat, who would become Linda Takita when she might have married Michael Takita, someone else from the theater world here who had graduated Sue Ann Loudon's program at Baldwin. And Sue Ann Loudon, these really powerful artists, directors, organizing, motivating, pushing. This was just such a huge and foundational series of experiences that I got to have, watching, pretty much observing others on stage and participating in the behind the scenes, but fascinated. And I knew then that that's sort of where I wanted to head with this. But as I noted, academics were not my thing. I didn't know I was an artist. I had no clue. In high school, the only reason I gravitated towards art classes because the girl that I had a crush on was in art classes and enjoyed, it was in the art club. So when it came time to going to college, I certainly wasn't on that path, but I was an athlete. I was a soccer player. Soccer started on this island in 1977. And from the time I first played the game, the sport, I knew that was it for me. And I stopped playing all of the other sports and devoted myself to soccer. I ended up being one of the first from the island of Maui to go to college. And that was my ticket off the island and helped me overcome my academic deficiencies. I moved to San Jose to study art, graphic design specifically. I didn't even know what graphic design was, frankly. It just sounded cool. But film, I made my first film in Baldwin High School. I was certainly the only one in the school making movies. I couldn't even get people to be in the movies, which is a crazy thing to consider today when everybody has cameras in their hands, in their pocket, and is making movies on a minute by minute basis. Well, back then that's just not the way it was. The movies that I wanted to make, the movies that we were making, I was set out to make in high school. Nobody wanted anything to do with that. People were into making, performing on stage, but so I could get some actors to play with me. So by the time I got to college, I had an inkling that film and graphic design were things that I was interested in, things that I wanted to study, and also soccer. I wanted to play soccer. So I dropped into San Jose in 1982. I didn't know anything about any of that. It was the only college that I applied for. I didn't get accepted, but I had met the soccer coach. And so I contacted him, let him know that as a non-resident, I did not cut the mustard from an academic standpoint. And somehow I was invited to attend the school based on, the fact that I guess I could score goals. San Jose, as many of you know, many of you who are involved in technology, became the Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley happened around me. When I moved to San Jose, it was an orchard. It was a small town with small town sensibilities. And this was prior to this was the 80s, this was prior to the digital revolution. In art school, so all my degrees in radio, television, film, and in graphic design art are traditional. It's all traditional working with halftones and printing presses and broadcasts, television broadcast and the early versions of video. And I was into radio too. Radio was really a fascinating, the theater of the mind. Radio is always really fascinating to me from a storytelling standpoint. Well, by the end of the 80s, when I was about to graduate, and I played in college, and I had started to play competitively outside of college once that had ended. So I was getting paid to play soccer while I was still in school, and I graduated with these degrees. However, as many of you would know, the computer was arriving. First computer that arrived in our department was a Unix machine. It was massive. It took up an entire classroom adjacent to our classroom. So in my senior year, it was the first time I got to actually work computer art. And what I did was I merged, we designed this stuff. It was all coding, and I had someone else who could type, because I couldn't, to actually program this device. But what I was really doing was creating this digital interface that we would then end up videotaping and then superimposing film and video into it. So we created this multimedia piece using the early technology. So it was my first experience with anything digital. And it was cumbersome and it was unwieldy, but yeah, it was cool. And this concept by 1990 of desktop publishing was arriving. Everything was, turning upside down, Well, however, but what I was doing was I was having a whole lot of success producing television, a lot. Comedy in particular. I've been a comedian my whole life, mostly through survival, growing up as the only white kid in your class, let alone everywhere you go on the island of Maui. It really helped to have two things. It helped to run fast, and it helped to be funny. And so comedy was always my bag. Well, by the end of the 80s, I was producing and I was still not out of school. I was producing a variety show in the Bay Area called Glad You Could Make It. It was a really ambitious, it was a freak show. Frankly, it was sort of a situation comedy variety show / whatever we wanted it to be. And it was the first time that I got the opportunity to move my craft from just me and my buddies and whoever I could coerce to do stuff into having to actually raise some money, produce, organize, recruit, motivate. We shot 7 episodes of Glad You Can Make It. When all was said and done, the cast was over 400 people had participated in this crazy show, including African dancers. And, if we'd meet people, and I had a couple partners working with me, if we'd meet anybody who was a musician or an artist, a visual artist, whatever, we found a way to weave them into our weirdo story. So my obsession with comedy and film and video and television was working out really, really good. By the time I was graduating in 1989, and some of you may know this or recall this, cable television, of course, was taking over. That year, 3 comedy cable networks were being started. The Ha Network, something that became Comedy Central, and there was one other. So the timing was right. I was graduating college. I was a hotshot in all of these film, television things. I was a comedian. The people that I was working with were funny, and we were young and ready to take on the world. So I had done some outreach. I wasn't going to go on to further study. I was ready. I was either going to move down to LA, Hollywood, and jump in, or I had my eye on New York, where 2 of these cable channels were starting up, were firing up. Did a lot of outreach, sent our reels in, got a lot of inquiries, had a fair amount of interest in this and that, and had invitations to roll in to New York and pitch a show or this, exciting times. However, what was going on here on Maui was my father was diagnosed with melanoma. And so I was faced with this choice, this big choice at the end of my college career. And that's, do I come home and take care of my dad and be part of that? Or do I go off and into wonderland and pursue these hopes and dreams of a young writer, comedian, filmmaker, whatever I thought I was. And I was still playing soccer for money. So that was going on. I had a pretty vibrant life on the mainland. I made the right decision, and I walked away from all of that, and I moved back to Maui in the summer of 1989. Was able to help my father close down his business on Vineyard, his law practice, and spend quality time taking care of him as his nurse, essentially, all the way through his passing at the end of that year, which I was present for. Many of you, of course, identify with these experiences for any number of reasons, but what I would say is it was the right decision. I would never regret. It was horrifying and painful and everything else one might have might wish to imagine, but it was the right thing to do. In walking away from all these opportunities and the things that I had going on, those doors, they weren't necessarily open to me, not in an easy way. That's not the way these industries work. Everything's pretty flighty. When you're hot, you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. When you disappear, you're gone. And so I was gone. But you know what? I didn't care. I managed to cobble some money painting houses. My dad died, it was just me on this island going, okay, I'm 25, now what? I managed to cobble some money together painting houses. One of my soccer teams re-signed me, brought me back, flew me back to the mainland. It was a Portuguese team, actually. And I would go on to not only play with Portuguese teams, but an Iranian team and many others during that career. When I got back to the mainland, in California in particular, I had no interest in production or these industries or making movies or television or any of it. Might come as a surprise to some of you, but some of the personalities involved in these industries are a little unbalanced. So at 25, when I got back to the mainland, aside from playing soccer, and I had been coaching soccer while I was taking care of my dad, I had the opportunity to coach Baldwin High School, my alma mater, which was really special. So by the time I got back to the mainland, all I wanted to do was work with kids. It was a healing thing, and so I did. I started teaching in the inner city schools in San Jose. Migrant kids. I was teaching English as a second language. I was teaching art. I had a 6th grade class, which was really fantastic. And so 2 or 3 years of teaching and playing soccer. I was at that point in my life, I was ready to be a teacher. It's a middle school teacher or whatever. I just thought that it was so meaningful. You go home at the end of every day, especially in my case, working in my English as a second language class that I had for a year, 32 kids, and I shared another class of 32, but in my classroom, 18 languages were spoken. And every day I went home knowing I made a difference in someone's life. It was deeply meaningful, put it that way. And I didn't even speak English that well. I'm from Maui. And I tell you what, being a native pidgin speaker is a real advantage out in that big world, especially not only when you're trying to teach kids who don't speak your language, when you're playing soccer with Portuguese or Iranians or any of a number of ethnic groups that I was involved with. So I'm just painting a little world about education, which I ended up having to leave behind. Some of you may know this. Education doesn't pay. When you're getting paid 20 grand a year in a town where a 1-bedroom apartment is $1,400 bucks. Yeah, so something had to give. So I went into I went into private industry. I took a job with the soccer uniform manufacturer and dove all into sales and marketing, became a national sales and marketing director, traveled the country. I'd go to 20 to 25 soccer conventions a year in any of a number of states. So for a younger guy, it was really fantastic to be able to travel the country, hanging out with soccer people. The company I worked for, they encouraged me to keep playing and devote a big part of my life to being an athlete. So I did that. And I rode that all the way into, I'd say my mid 30s, when entertainment and the arts I just started to want that again. However, I was educated in a traditional way. So I ended up having to go back to school. So I did. I attended University of Santa Cruz in order to learn something, learn Photoshop, learn all these digital tools that were coming about. So I had to go back to school to retrain and to be credible. Once I got a handle on all those tools and a nascent web tool, Flash, Macromedia Flash came along, and I mastered it within minutes and was able to get a job in Silicon Valley at an interactive television software company, creating electronic programming guides. This is the early days, and in this company, their technology was rooted in 3D. I was hired as the marketing director, the marketing design director, because I had video skills, I had marketing skills, I had all of these, things that they needed in order to explain to the Mitsubishis, the Sonys of the world, what they were doing, what this technology represented. So I got in there, figured out how to do all that, and quickly figured out that the product was deeply flawed. And I'd sit back in these meetings, just sort of kind of shaking my head until the CEO said, "Hey, you don't seem to think that what we're doing is cool. What's that all about?" I said, "Well, it's not. You guys, you're not doing this. This is interactive television. There's nothing about this. This is compelling. You guys are missing the boat." And they were hiring these huge consulting, interface design consulting groups to come in, huge money to come in and tell them how things should look. So the CEO said, "Well, do you think you can do better?" I said, "Yeah, give me 5 days." So I didn't sleep, and over 5 days, I brought in one of my former college buddies, and we totally reinvented this 3D interface to deliver data, an electronic programming guide, something that the technology at the time, set-top boxes, couldn't handle. But we were right around the corner, from these technologies more, becoming viable. I ended up designing all these things and then pitching and sharing with Mitsubishi and Apple and Sony and all the heavies from Japan and everywhere, be coming in, and I'd pitch and I'd share my stuff. And well, the company ended up being acquired by Tribune Media, based on the strength of the product that I had built. I was an artist, though, managing 35 engineers, many of whom in the Silicon Valley and others from around the world. But I was the only artist, which was another theme in my life, always being the only one or the first. But what a rich and incredible experience. I was given the opportunity when the company was acquired to move to Chicago, where Tribune is. By then, Hawaii was calling in a really unusual way. For all those years, I'd wanted to move home to Maui, but it wasn't viable. I'd come back and I'd look around. There's no television, there's no film, there's no art, there's no graphic design, there's no nothing. Not only here, but on Oahu. And so my attitude was, oh, there's nothing there. And at some point, roughly 2004, I was back. My brother was turning 40. We threw a party for him, put the band back together, got people from the old theater world, and it was just a beautiful evening in Waihee under the stars. And I just had a moment of looking around and going, oh, wow, my attitude's wrong. I've always been in touch with what's not here. My dad's not here no more. I can't work. I can't this. And so once again, I said, I'm out of here. Well, that night, and I was supposed to fly home the next day, I was staying at friends in Waehu. And I woke up in the middle of the night with a series of dreams. I woke up and it was this story flooding me. I just sat down and wrote it all down. Next morning, I looked at it. I didn't understand any of it. Said, but something was there. I hadn't written anything in 15 years. Looked like a movie, I don't know. So I changed my flight, stayed. That night happened again, 2, 3 in the morning. I wake up, all these ideas flooded. After 3 days of this, I had the makings of a motion picture. And that's when I realized, oh my God, it's time. Maui's saying, get back here and get involved. And this Maui's still Maui. Maui's still cool. Of course, the concept of career suicide was very real. But I made the call and I moved home to plant a flag in the ground and to be a part of the beginning of these industries. I realized I had to confront, wow, what's wrong with me? I've got this attitude that I come back and, hey, nobody's doing it for me. Nobody's handing it to me. It's not here. It doesn't exist. Well, it's never going to exist if people like me who care about the culture, the community, who have deep-seated roots here and acquire these skills, don't come back and put them in service of the community and the culture. So I made the call and I moved home in 2005. Hooked up with that movie that I was working on, and I worked on it for a year, 3 jobs. That's what became Kuleana, the movie Kuleana that some of you would be aware of. But I didn't pursue it at that time because I had to also be honest. Who am I to be away for so long and come back here and make a movie and tell people how something is? I didn't know. I needed to come back and live here and own it. So when I got back, I got involved with Eric Gilliam and Willie Kay. We performed a couple of companies and a music label and the music act Barefoot Natives, of which I was the producer and writing our theatrical shows. That all snowballed into what became Get a Job when I was finally really ready to go deeper and take on the more challenging side of motion pictures, which is finding money, let alone how you're going to put a crew together or a cast. Well, we did it. You know, as my friends in Hollywood like to say that I make movies with the spare change I find between my couch cushions, and it's not that far off of the truth. But we had a certain caveat about how we were going to do this, and so in 2010, with Get a Job, when we had the minimal financing in place, we went for it. It's an all Hawaii cast and crew. Only 5 people who worked on that movie were not from the islands, residents of Hawaii. We only had maybe 2 people outside of those 5 who had ever been on a movie set before, in front of or behind the camera. And that's where the education kicked in. My background as an educator, I took that whole thing on that, okay, great. We don't have the A-team. We don't have this. We don't have, but what we do have, we can make, and I can teach this. We can teach this. I will tell you today that of the original crew from Get a Job that had never been on a movie set before, about 10 of them work exclusively in these industries. So it can happen. That's an example of workforce development. A low budget project that doesn't pay, but creates experience and abundance, life-changing experiences. People get that close to the set. It's a lot different than being on a big Hollywood gig, pulling a cable, or never being anywhere near, you know, the war zone that is a motion picture production. So Get a Job ends up inspiring all these other people. I come out and Get a Job saying, oh, I want to make another movie. I'm going to make Kuleana. So I started rewriting it. Well, it turns out it was even more difficult to complete that. I rewrote that movie 12 times over 11 years. I also thought that, oh, wow, it'll be so much easier to raise the money now because I know what I'm doing. And people came up to us with Get a Job saying, man, this movie's so good. Next time you do this, you know, count me in. Hey, we'll be there. We'll help you fund. We'll help you this. And I believed them. So when it was time to actually make Kuleana, and I had that script, and I said, all right, let's raise that money. Woo, doggy. That took 4.5 years. And nearly everybody who had said, yeah, when you need it, I'm there for you, they weren't. And but that's cool, because at the end of the day, the investors in both projects that ended up stepping up and getting involved did so for the right reasons. They did so for reasons that were aligned with the bigger picture, not only with Kuleana, what we were working to do culturally, but this idea of creating an industry one movie at a time, project-based. And so, yeah, did the movies make money? No, of course not. They're low-budget independent movies. Did we have a great time? Sure. Did it change things? Yeah. Did people learn? Uh-huh. And everybody involved with these movies continues to want to be involved and continues to work in the industries. I look around here at the crews that are working on the films that have been through here in the last 2 years, and it's a whole lot of people that worked on Get a Job and Kuleana. So Kuleana's done, and I was ready to get on to my next movie. I knew better than to believe people who were saying, hey, I'll finance your next movie. I knew better. I learned the hard way that's not how that works. However, there were opportunities coming my way, and I'm still sitting on something that's not a Hawaii project. It's no doubt marketable, fundable, pitchable, all of it. So 2, 3, 4 years ago, when I was at the point of, all right, I'm gonna take my shot at the bigger level. I can't create another low budget independent movie here to help our culture, our community, our industry. I can't do it. I don't have it in me at the moment. I don't have any story left, and I can't financially continue to live like this, approaching 50 or early 50s and still having to strive like somebody straight out of college. So I was ready to, go play in the big game. And that's when the college, John McKee, the vice chancellor at UH Maui College, found me. We had had a dialogue going on for years about the need for a program in education. Well, they had established a creative media program, and John and Louis Ho'okoana were turning to me about what I thought and if I'd get involved. I did. And then the opportunity not only to work for the college and teach again came up, but the opportunity to take on and to take a job as program coordinator and get to build a film school, get to build an art school, a graphic design school, fell right into my lap. So I took it. Conflicted again, like, oh God, I fought to create these opportunities, but now, God, I really want to do this. And this is part of a Kuleana, an extension of, everything I said. My whole life was about these things. And so I did the right thing and I took it. And I will tell you this before I turn it over to questions. When the pandemic hit and I had a job, my God, that was a real cool thing. Life sort of, gave me hard choices, but I kept making the right ones. And to have a job, but it's not just having a job. I had worked for myself for 15 years, and my commute was from my bedroom to my office, which, was one of the hardest things about taking a job. But throughout the pandemic, I would share this. Every day I got to nurture and work on and for this school. So I was continuing to live with purpose. While a lot of the entertainers and writers and directors and people in the entertainment industry got sidelined during the pandemic, I got to hang out with these beautiful island creatives who need people like me, like us, reinforcing that a career in the arts is possible and it can happen here. So in the last 3 to 4 years, we've managed to establish Academy for Creative Media Maui with degrees in filmmaking and graphic design, and we're working on one now in animation Animation, as you know, technology people, is the core of all of the emergent technologies. So animation is not just about cartoons. It goes far deeper, and it's rooted in technology. So will the day come when I'm going to shift back to writing and directing movies? Sooner than later. But this school continues to be my passion. And I'm happy to share this May, Academy for Creative Media Maui will graduate 14 island creatives. So let's open the floor up to any questions about anything that I might have blabbered about. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Mahalo, Brian. So we're asking people, that was a great story, by the way. So when we talked story, we went through this, and I'm sure, and I hope people enjoyed your story like I did when we kind of went over it. We were both reminiscing. Yeah, a little early than you about both King Theater and the Yao Theater, right? I used to watch the matinees for Satoichi, right? They used to have the Japanese language, the samurai, right? Shows. I see Thomas Calhoun laughing, right? So we all share those kinds of memories for those of us who were born and raised on the island. So yes, well, one of the first questions, if people could put their questions in the chat, that would be awesome. Unless Annette, if you want people just to ask their questions over you guys can just ask your questions, just don't step over each other. So let me do one in the chat first, Leslie, and then I call on you. So Sandy Ryan says, how can we see Kuleana and get a job today?
Well, good question. I pulled them down from the streaming services last year. I didn't feel like our distribution agreements were servicing us. The world had changed. The streaming wars had begun. And so all of the distributors are completely invested in their own original content. So little indies like us no longer monetize. The model that was favorable through Amazon at one time literally is you get paid about a penny every time somebody watches your movie, which last time I checked doesn't add up to much. So I pulled them both down about a year ago with the idea that I'm just going to sit tight and wait until I can scheme and figure out how they'll get seen and monetize again, or how I might be able to re-release them at a time when I can draw some attention to my students. That's really kind of my mindset about that right now. The greater likelihood is that the next time I do something, then those titles will get hot. But if you go to hawaiicinema.com, you can order the DVDs or Blu-rays of those. That's the only place. I don't have them anywhere else in streaming. However, if you're nice and you send me an email, I'll put it in my chat or in the chat. I'd be happy to send you a Vimeo link to satiate your curiosity.
Okay, so we're gonna Robbie has her hand up, so we'll do Leslie and then Robbie Melton right after that. Okay, so Leslie, ask your question, then Robbie, you're in the batter's box.
So Brian, I actually have just a comment and a thank you again for sharing your story. And I've known you for years. I've seen both of your films in the EO Theater during First Fridays or other showings of them, and they're fabulous. And I know you're friends with my husband, but I never connected the dots that Bill Cohn is your father. Oh my goodness. Great mentor to my husband. He put me, I maybe was 25. He put me on my first board of directors. He invited me to the Maui Philharmonic Board of Directors, which was the precursor as a presenting organization before we had the MAC. And so it's such a great loss to our community when we lost him. But music, art, the arts is in your DNA because your father was probably one of the biggest champions of arts in Maui County. He and of course the late Colin Cameron. So, and the last thing I wanted to say is thank you for your work establishing the school and congratulations on conferring degrees this May. We are your pipeline, the STEMWorks programs, particularly at Maui Waiana and Maui High's ACOM program. You have some amazingly talented digital and graphic artists that your pipeline. So thank you for having the next phase to get them degrees at home.
Yeah, and what I'd add about the pipeline that we've established is we are more of a bridge now. What we are is we offer 2-year degrees, associate and science degrees in these areas, but we have an articulation agreement with West Oahu, whereby our graduates can transfer over after they graduate and attend for 2 more years of study and earn a Bachelor of Arts degree without ever leaving the island. And so in May, not only will our program have 14 graduates, but it'll be our first 2 graduates, Yasha Ronquillo and Dexter Corpus, who have graduated from Maui College and are going to be earning their Bachelor of Arts in Creative Media from West Oahu. So we're a bridge. And yeah, the pipeline from, I mean, island creatives, they're so talented, they're so great, and they need a place. Now they don't have to leave the island if they can't afford or if they don't want it.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to the next question. Robbie Melton.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Brian, I love Kuleana. And I took a whole group of my friends when it premiered over in Oahu. And everyone thought it was a fabulous movie. I've been following Hawaiian cinema for a while, and one of the questions I have for you is, it seems like it's so hard for Hawaiian-made films or Hawaiian-focused films to get traction as a national audience, just like The Waterman is out right now, and they're trying to get that into all the theaters about Du Kahanamoku. And so what are your thoughts on that? Why is there not this sort of, because I mean, they're great stories, and especially Kuleana's great history.
Yeah, I would answer it this way. I'd say 15 years ago, these kinds of stories would have had a shot. Get a Job, by 2010, a comedy, an independent comedy, didn't have a chance. Napoleon Dynamite was the last true indie comedy to ever, register. Circumstances changed, and the streaming services have made it worse. It's really about recognizable faces, is what it really kind of boils down to. The Descendants got seen, right? George Clooney's in that. so our little independent motion pictures, this is just the cold hard facts, is the reason we're not tracking is the rest of the world just doesn't recognize our faces. And so it's a chicken and egg. And that's again why I think the Kuleanas, the Get a Jobs, and the producers in the state that are investing and putting our talent on screen, over time, we're going to crack the code. In fact, what I would point out is Jason Momoa, who is one of these people, is now himself originating, along with a partner, a friend of mine, an Apple series. Because of him, it got funded, financed. And so the rules on Hawaii content could change depending on how this Apple original series works out. It's going to get seen because Jason Momoa is in it. Now, would he continue to, make movies here, or especially these smaller ones? So it's just the cold hard facts. I'm not cynical about it. I'm just, this is the way it works. In order to finance a movie and get it seen, to finance it, you need stars, you need recognizable faces. And in order to get it seen in this day and age, especially when people scroll through Netflix or whatever, what are they looking for? They're looking for somebody they recognize. The only alternative to that is the horror genre, where you don't need stars. But so I think if Hawaii, we started making horror movies, we might actually crack the code. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know Disney.
So Robbie, we're going to move on to another question. Okay. So this is from Tom Calhoun. Is music production, movie scoring part of the course structure on Maui yet?
Not so much, but that's sort of changing. The gentleman who did the score for Kuleana is by the name of Johnny Wilson, is a legit sound designer and composer. And he established, he worked with me. I paired him with Willie Kay. Willie didn't know how to do any of that, but Willie is Willie, right? So I got Johnny and Willie working together. So the score of Kuleana was the result of the two of them working together. Well, Johnny and another guy, Ben Yashin, literally have just, and I hope I'm not out front of this because I know that they're going to be making some more splashy announcements, but they've just created a post-production audio facility. And this is an example of the type of infrastructure that we actually need to create work and jobs here, is these kinds of things. The idea that we should wait back and wait for Hollywood to come and plant movies here is crazy. We need to start looking at how we can create this type of infrastructure, because Johnny and his people, they not only have a facility that they can rent to people, but they can do the work here now. And post-production is something that we can do here, let alone virtual productions like The Mandalorian. That is really the opportunity, the growth opportunity here on our little island, is going to be productions like The Mandalorian.
Okay, mahalo for that answer. And thank you, Tom, for that question. We'll move on to Jeremy Dodd. Okay, so he says, hi, Brian, fellow
Hello.
screenwriter here with a project at Bilstein Gray. I'd love to hear more about the fundraising process for your films. Was it via a large donors, a lot of small dollar donors, or both? In addition, let me scroll down here. Was there any organizations or agencies that helped you make connections during this process?
A lot of people helped, and so I won't say there wasn't a lot of help. There was no funding in the state of Hawaii for this sort of thing. There's production rebates, but you got to come up with, the spend has to be over 250, which both of ours were. So we did participate in the tax rebates. It wasn't small donors. Well, everything's relative, right? But in the case of our budgets, it was, it was people 25, 50 grand, and a series of people, who could afford to play the game and support and be real practical about what they would be getting back from a rebate and there's also tax breaks associated with investment. But yeah, if you can drop me an email and we can have an offline conversation of this, I can help you how I can. Just pardon me if I cry a lot when we're talking about the financing process. And if I end up in the fetal position, know that that usually passes after about 15 minutes. So you just be patient. And if we're in a public place, just apologize on my behalf. Tell them he's cool. It's not a seizure. He'll be all right. He'll come out of this.
Thanks, Brian, for that. And I'm sure Jeremy
I'll make sure I bring my heart paddles just in case.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, that'd be good. That'd be good. And a helmet. Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to our last question, because we have another breakout session after this, and it's from Jennifer Chase. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Is cybersecurity and or software development intertwined in the arts?
Well, not so much. I mean, the arts and technology have really converged, and they started doing so 20 years ago. And so, I'm an artist who relies on technology. That's just the bottom line. Cybersecurity is definitely, a big thing in Hollywood and at the higher level of the game. There's no doubt about that. But, in terms of the study, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I would point out that there's a pretty good cybersecurity instructor and program at Maui College. There's a program referred to as ABIT, and some great opportunities educationally here on Maui for people who want to move into that sphere. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't really know how to define that. Define that beyond that.
Yeah, we're good friends with Professor Bhattacharya over.
Oh, he's fantastic. He's really sharp.
And he's been involved, as Leslie's nodding, in a lot of our programs with our STEM work students.
Oh yeah, and he's great. He's great. He's just a really nice guy too. He's a wonderful person.
Well, thank everyone for the questions. And we're going to move on now to our next question. and our breakout session. But thanks, Brian. Wonderful job. Great answers, by the way. Very insightful. I think people are all clapping here.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to hear me blab. And my email's in the chat if you have any further questions or need to contact me or want to know more about Academy for Creative Media. If you know any young creatives that might want to get turned on to what we're doing.
Okay, so here's the question, gang. What do you think is possible here on Maui? And what steps can government and private industry be taking to establish and grow an industry? And now, after you've heard Brian's talk, I'm almost sure there's going to be a lot of discussion on this question. So, what do you think is possible here on Maui, and what steps can government and private industry be taking to establish and grow an industry? So, we're going to break people out into groups right now.
As usual, we do like to get your feedback and on what you thought of the meeting. You know, what did you like? What can we improve so that we continue to grow? And suggested speakers, if you know of anyone, or particular topics, and let us know. I've popped the link in the chat so you can easily follow that, and we'll also send it in a follow-up email to you, as well as resources from today's meeting. We'll make sure you can get access to the replay and share that with people. So thank you for that. We did promise you a drawing, and today's prize is an opportunity. Brian has generously contributed this prize, an opportunity to work with Brian on his next project. So we have that as a prize. We'll draw that one first, and then we also have a Foodland gift card. So we're going to pop that on the screen.
Are you sure this isn't an either or?
So we're going to click to spin, and there we go. We'll come up with a random winner, so you'll just know it's not arranged. Ute, congratulations. So we'll be in touch with you about that opportunity, and see also that there is a fit there that is something that you would like. And we'll connect you with Brian. And then we also have the Foodland gift card, which is also a popular prize. So we're just going to click that one. And thanks so much for staying to the end. This is sort of a little bit of your prize as well for that. Geraldine, thank you for joining us, and we'll send you details of that as well. And just to make sure, if you can copy that link before you leave for the Survey Monkey, please let us know what you thought of the evening. We look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to hopefully the next Maui Techohana actually being face-to-face as all the opportunities to gather arise again. So stay in tune with all that we do with Maui Economic Development Board. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Brian. Did you have any final words to share before we leave?
All I would say, and this just drafts off of parts of the conversation in the last 15 minutes, is I would say, and I think a lot of people have already expressed this in different ways. I'll put it in industry terms. We have a term. We have a term that governs the industry: above the line and below the line. It's when you refer to above the line roles within the motion picture industry, you're referring to the people who have something to do with the creative side: producers, directors, an editor, the actors. These are what's referred to as above the line. Below the line is crew and everybody else. Okay, it's not a caste system. This is just how it's described. In order to have a legit industry here in Hawaii that sustains, we have got to invest in above the line, developing above the line talent. And that's what starts with education. That's what starts with the workforce opportunities. As Jeremy pointed out, the incentives, incentives are going to drive whether productions come here or not. There needs to be also money, and someone else pointed out, there needs to be money available for resident producers. So that has to happen. We can't be, as we have for 15 years, the local producers are fighting for the same incentives as others. And back in the day, Act 221, I was competing with Lost and all of these huge things. We couldn't get money from investors here locally because they were giving their money to the outsiders. So there needs to be a distinction. But to summarize it all, we have to generationally grow above the line. If the kids or the youth or the people my age even are invested in being here and writing, directing, producing, we're paying our taxes here, and we are the ones responsibly that are going to hire local and empower other residents of Hawaii to grow forward in these industries. This is what's got to happen. We cannot just host outsiders and provide crew. That's not enough. That's not going to do anything for us.
Mahalo. Well said, sir. So we'd like to say aloha and a hui ho. Stay tuned for our next Techohana, and we'll invite you back again.